Note 2. Evolution. A century ago, Charles Darwin shook the biological sciences to their core and provided in his On the Origin of Species a revolutionary new system of explanation for the complexity, diversity, and the marvelousness of the living world. His fundamental proposition, evolution by natural selection, has been fully substantiated and is the basis of modern biology. Here is Darwin's definition of natural selection. As many more individuals of each species are born than can possibly survive, and as consequently there is a frequently recurring struggle for existence, it follows that any being, if it vary however slightly in any manner profitable to itself, under the complex and sometimes varying conditions of life, will have a better chance of surviving, and thus be naturally selected. Darwin's great work did three things. It showed how untenable were then existing theories, creationism and catastrophism. It showed that the theory of descent with modification, already proposed by others, could make sense of the organic world. And it provided a mechanism, natural selection, that was able to explain the evolutionary change. The explanation is both simple and powerful. Thomas Henry Huxley, England's greatest zoologist, is reported to have said, when he finished reading The Origin, "How extremely stupid not to have thought of that." Today, biologists think in terms of populations and gene pools. We know that mistakes, mutations, in the transmission of the hereditary blueprints, although they provide the raw material for evolutionary change, do not themselves determine the direction of that process. We have come to realize that the individual's genetic message is only an expression of the possibilities of genetic combination within the population. It is the population interacting with the environment that composes the genetic message, since some combinations are successful and others are not. To put it simply, the individual organism cannot evolve. It is born, develops, reproduces or not, and dies. It does its damnedest to adapt, but it cannot change its hereditary material. It tries its message against the environment, and if it survives and reproduces, that message is represented to a greater or lesser degree in the next generation. Messages leading to less successful reproduction, numbers alone are not most important. What is crucial is the number of offspring that survive to reproduction, or to no reproduction at all, are slowly removed from the population, simply because they are represented in the next generation in a smaller proportion. Contemporary biologists understand natural selection as differential reproductive success. The population changes its hereditary material, that is, it evolves as a result of the selective process. The economist, Kenneth Boulding, has suggested that all living forms develop an image of their environments. Those whose genetic and developmental processes provide a proper image of the surroundings, which are constantly changing since they are primarily made up of other evolving forms, are those that are adapted and survive to reproduce. One might look upon a gene pool's changing image, its attempts to stay adapted, survive, as its trip. Thus we can speak of a cat gene pool trip, Katniss. Orchid trip, maple tree trip, orangutan trip, Homo sapiens trip. Look inside yourself, my friend. The reptile, the fish, the slime, and the putrid chemical soup are still there. You and your species code are but a thin veneer of 2 billion years of trying to save your image. Evolution is the production of new codes of information. A modern biologist is interested in how the existing codes, represented by all the diverse living forms, including man, came to be the way they are. I like to poke at my molecular biologist friends that they are studying the biology of the very early Precambrian periods, and that we organismic and extraorganismic biologists study what has happened in the last 500 million or billion or so years. Life was inevitable. Its genes necessarily programmed into themselves the instructions for self-reproduction. Those genes that didn't aren't around anymore. Living forms then proceeded to more complexity to assure survival of their gene pools, or, in a Darwinian sense, adaptation is a continuous changing of the programming to permit survival, the continuous refining of each gene pool's image of its environment. But the direction of life was not implicit in its origin, nor in the atomic organization of its genes, just as the uniqueness of life is in its chemical organization. So is the uniqueness of the multitudinous living forms to be found in the history of the processes that called them into being. It is the unpredictable historicity of the selective process that provides the interesting diversity of living types. The origin of species established the fact that the harmony of the living universe is not the wisely planned work of a creator, but the product of interaction of natural forces. Darwin did something more. He provided each of us with the possibility of an inexhaustible love affair with the natural world. For the evolutionary perspective leads us to look about us closely, to ask how living things got to be the way they are. We have learned to ask why in a new and rewarding way. Why this plant? Why that animal? Why monkeys? Why apes? Why man? Why mind?